What? Jordan Peterson has started his own university? Actually, yes, he has. And it is run about the way you would think it would be run. Playing off the alleged downfall of American college campuses, Peterson has opened up his online school by creating a university-like product for people that distrust and are suspicious of universities. Peterson and his spokesman have said that what they are doing is creating an environment for students to have an experience focused on self-improvement, openness, and debate rather than politics. Now, I noticed education wasn't part of that list, and Peterson is not the only professor at his university that is striking out against these traditional educational ideals. For example, the class Deconstructing Decolonization is taught by a theologian, and a class on nutrition is taught by an author, not a doctor. When one person sought to get answers to what motivated Peterson's students, he was actually expelled from the university. So is Peterson appealing to people of a like mind, or is he taking advantage of people that want an education but can't really afford one? This story is from Slate Magazine, was written by Luke Winke and published on October 3rd, 2024. Now, I had a lot of problems with this. It seems like every time I'm on Nonprofits, I get a Jordan Peterson story. I don't know what that's about.
It's conspiracy.
But, all right, John, since you spoke up first, what was your response about Peterson's university or what was Peterson's response when he's at university? What was Peterson's response when they asked about his university's accreditation?
I find this interesting because Peterson Academy spokesperson said that the school, which they described as being in beta right now, which to me is kind of like you either have a school or you don't. It's either open or it's not. So, but indeed,
well, they're calling it a school.
I won't. But they are indeed hoping for accreditation and has interest from accrediting bodies, but added, we're not going to alter the way we educate people in order to fit an outdated system. Basically, if they don't follow the accreditation principles and how to get accredited, and they're not going to teach people, and they're not going to have things like syllabus, outlines, lectures, and changing educational practices as they're generally accepted in people who are educated in how to educate people, they're not going to get accredited. And I don't think they should be if what they're saying is that we can't teach people the way everybody else did. We have to teach them the way we want to. They're not going to stand a hope. The accrediting authorities are granted that authority from the head of the Department of Education. So except maybe in Oklahoma, there's probably not a legitimate accreditation authority who's going to fall for any of that. That's a backhanded comment to a couple of every other nonprofits that we do about Oklahoma. Education.
Ryan Walters.
Without legitimate testing and yes, there is a science to how to ask the right questions and statistically verify them. It is called psychometrics. My father was a psychometrician, so I got kind of inundated with it, but it's kind of a statistical and psychological mix of things on how to ask the right questions to determine somebody's competency in a particular subject. It's not easy, but standardized testing needs that sort of normalization, statistical normalization to make that happen. This is just a joke or scam. I think I agree with one thing that Kelly said, that he's just trying to make money. He's a con artist. He changes his stance on things depending on who's paying him the most, I think. But it's also JP ego involved too. So it's like
that was what I got out of it. I just looked at this as Peterson's opportunity to fleece some of the people that follow him on the internet, and it seems to be the operating procedure of many con men nowadays. That instead of just fleecing the people in this small town town and then moving on to the next small town, I can just sit back and use the internet and I don't have to go anywhere. I can just keep the money rolling in. So, and it seems like that's what Peterson's doing here. Cindy, how does the U.S. educational system compare to the systems in other countries?
So that's the first thing I looked into after reading this article, because it's from an education study published on World Population Review. They say that ironically, despite the United States having the best surveyed education system on the globe, U.S. students consistently score lower in math and science than students from many other countries. So depending on how you measure education in the US, you can be either at the first place or at the 14th place. Like another study made by the Global Citizens for Human Rights, they just evaluate the scores on reading, math, and science. And they make a ranking based on that. And with this system, the US is 14th, which is not great, right?
Not great.
So I wasn't aware of this trend of creating fake schools before I read this article, but it scares the hell out of me, because the US has tried to get rid of public education for decades now, since Reagan pretty much, and to the profit of private schools, which are owned by multi-billion and billionaires.
Mostly religious organizations also.
And religious organization or religious people who want to impose their view. So this is already very dangerous, especially with in the country with the worst inequality levels there is, which is the US right now. But if this idea of providing some kind of alternate education gets any traction, and like some other billionaire like Elon Musk or anyone else gets behind this, along with the alternative facts movement led by the conservative movement, this could do a lot of damage to the US and most likely to the world as well.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that way about any kind of poor education. I mean, I think bad education is worse than no education. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but that's the way I see it. Cynthia, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
We fall behind in science and technology, and we're no longer necessarily the leader in those fields. And as we go on, I mean, take a think about this. India graduates more PhDs than we have students in college every year. So think about that. And these guys are doing research, or they're being hired in the United States to come and help us out. And so I just want everybody to stop and think about that. If we're a declining superpower, we're losing the edge exactly where we don't need to, and that's in education.
Cynthia, do you think Peterson's online school appeals to a certain demographic?
Well, at its core, the Academy actually appears to market itself as a refuge for so-called woke influences, a place where learners can reinforce their biases without confronting the complex realities of a modern world. So if we were actually looking at who we're saying this particular school is for, I don't necessarily think it's a far reach to say cisgender, heterosexual, man, height that we are actually looking for. Okay. Now, not to say that there's going to be other people who may appeal to this ideology, not go for the courses that are being offered in this so-called school.
Right.
I use that term loosely. But Kelly, as you mentioned previously, one of the courses like Destructing Decolonization, or another one that was spoken about, the boy crisis, actually presents a very narrow, one-sided view of a complex issue, of complex issues themselves. Especially if we're talking about the impacts of colonization all around the world, or if we're even talking about the ever-changing roles that genders happen to present itself depending on where we are now in time. There they're saying that, okay, you have to follow this particular viewpoint that is more patriarchal, traditional, as we talked about in the previous segment of the week. And that is going to be your guiding post on how life is supposed to be. But we all know that that is just not the case. Issues on gender, issues on history, issues on even how other cultures and nations have influenced other cultures and nations, are not black and white. They're extremely nuanced. And we are still feeling those effects today. And I know that we cover Peterson so much on the nonprofits. I was about to call ourselves the non-Petersons, but we oftentimes bring up his fallacious arguments, especially when he tries to make, especially gender issues so black and white. And they're not. They're not. So, all in all, his non-compliance to being more nuanced in arguments, especially like when we're talking about curricula, and also the dubious qualifications of the instructors, as you talked about earlier, it really lacks diversity of thought. And Peterson, as we also know, loves to champion that he's the free speech god, along with Elon Musk, as Cindy mentioned previously, but they're not. They're not. They're only free speech gods to their narrative, their ideology, and their way of thinking. That's it. That's all.
I just wanted to point out that when you go to school, you learn facts, you learn dates, you learn events in history, you learn to read, you read, you learn math and science, which are fact-based. Of course, you can have teachers who are trying to, influence you to their point of view. But the only thing you see here is not facts, is opinions. And you see only one side of opinion. And you know what we call this? It's indoctrination, right?
Yes.
When you teach people only one opinion, that's indoctrination.
Right. Like saying Jesus is Lord, right? Yeah. God is King. Heaven is above all where God lives. And there's no other conversation outside of maybe other belief systems or even other traditions that other people may actually possess. That, you are correct, Cindy, is completely, totally indoctrination. And that kills me. I'm so sorry, guys, but that kills me because this is a constant theme that we are seeing from people who actually possess these narratives. We are always constantly hearing, specifically from people like Peterson and those who happen to think like him, that the left, like us, would be indoctrinating kids in order for them to, be accepting of more people, to be more diversified in our thinking, to actually implore critical thinking and thought, to actually remember and think that there's other people that exist outside of you. What? Yes, that happens. So then they turn around and create schools. Oh, gosh, with such schools.
They don't even mention Krishna.
No. Right. And Krishna been around longer than Christ. Jesus. I'm about to say Christian been around longer than Christ. So, and that's the thing that really just kills me. So my whole thing is listen, don't you talk about the left or any other people that's trying to indoctrinate people who happen to be young or things of that nature when you all are doing this ad nauseum. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Go ahead, Kelly.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Fine.
Thank you.
One of the things that I really thought about in this article, behind the whole idea of Peterson starting this, was that what he would, and I mentioned it in the opening, is that what he was doing is that he's making this education accessible to people. And the author even mentions it in the article that, the few people he was able to talk to before he was expelled from the university, many of them just really wanted to learn. They weren't followers of Peterson. They wanted to learn these things, but really couldn't afford to go to school. And here was Peterson's university. I have such a hard time actually not doing the air quotes because it's not actually a real school. And even his spokesman didn't put education into the list of things they were doing. And it bothered me that here was people who were really looking to learn stuff, and were just being fleeced out of their money and being fed bullshit, So it was like taking education, and it's what seemingly is education anyway, and making it affordable for these people and not really giving them what they thought they were going to get out of it, So that I saw was a really big problem. I guess it's that was quality education as opposed to accessible education. And I'd like to get the whole panel's thoughts on that. Let's start with Cindy. What do you think?
I think you cannot have quality education if you don't have experts in each field you're teaching. And so that's it, because as you said, it's just sycophants teaching in these classes. So it cannot be quality teaching. But you're right. It's a shame that that people who want to learn are tricked to go there instead of being able to study like they could in any other country, because public education is a big problem in the U.S. But
serious trouble.
I don't fully agree with you with the idea that this is all a scam. I think it's just a tool for an agenda more than a scam to get people's money.
That's fair. John, what do you think? Accessible versus quality education?
Well, I don't think simple accessibility is an education. Quality of education is important. It has to meet a minimum standard. That's why we have accreditation. There's minimum standards of how a university or a college is run, what kind of depth they have to get into with various parts of it, and what subjects they can teach. And so it's like, if you're going to teach something, you want to have the most current, up-to-date information that you can have. Granted, that's always going to be a year or so behind what the people are researching, because you can't keep up with rewriting all your texts and lessons every few months. That's not going to happen. Or if it is, it's going to be done by AI, and I'm not trusting that. So, but yeah, so quality, there's got to be a minimum standard to be able to say that these people are ready to go out and serve the function at the level in society which they can work themselves into with a degree, but a minimum function of somebody who is calling themselves a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering, or a master's degree in physics, or a master's degree in industrial chemistry or materials science. They have to be able to work at a particular level in that thing. You don't want to go to a doctor who says, yeah, I kind of got my specialty in this, but barely passed the boards, and I didn't really do well on my orals, and but I still got the master's degree because I went to this university and they have lower standards. I don't want that. I don't want to go to that doctor. I don't want him anywhere near my body. Thank you very much. So it's like, that's where I stand with it. It's just minimum standards, yes, because you can't have everybody be a Princeton, a Harvard, a Yale. If they were all held to MIT standards of science, nobody get in them because nobody could graduate from them, right? You need to have a minimum standard which makes people useful and makes them valuable to the society in some form or another.
Yeah, well, I have actually expressed a couple of times here on Nonprofits over the years my dissatisfaction with the medical school in Grenada, which doesn't seem to have as good a standards as many of the medical schools in the U.S. So, what's your problem with AI, though, man? They just recently have found over 300 new geoglyphs in Nazca using AI.
Well, actually, yeah, they were using a new form of penetrating sensors for that too. But
no, it wasn't LiDAR. It was they were just using a different. They were using AI to kind of do like a contrast so that the lines were coming out darker with the AI, and then the AI was actually picking it up. It wasn't people who were looking for it. The AI was actually finding them and saying, "Hey, look, here's another one." So but I digress. Cynthia, as I tend to.
I don't want them updating textbooks without somebody reviewing the information.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I'll give you that. Cynthia, what about you? Accessible versus quality education?
Well, before I answer that question, Kelly, I just got to say that, the real reason why Jonathan has issues with AI is because he's been scared ever since that movie 2001 came out.
Yeah.
Now,
I noticed Jonathan keeps playing hide and seek with us too.
I know, right? That proves my point. We can be done here. No, but I think I want to answer this question a little bit differently, as far as like quality versus accessibility. So I think that the main issue that we're having here in the United States, specifically when it comes to education, is that quality of education is not standardized across the board. Depending on what your zip code is, depending on oftentimes what race you belong to, what ethnicity you belong to, or even what your political status is going to determine the type of education that you're going to get. And we have seen, unfortunately, a very dark history in the United States when it comes to what type of education one group gets versus another. And we even seen other studies that are fairly modern, which even shows adverse treatment of students depending on what race they are, what ethnicity they are, what gender they are, where they're located, and the like. So unfortunately, what we're seeing here is that since we have such a big problem when it comes to how we dole out education from kindergarten all the way to the end of high school, going into college, not everybody is going to be prepared to have the quality education that comes from the freshman year on up when they happen to get to university. So that's something that we have failed students here in the United States when it comes to preparing them for even being able to access a quality education, because we have not put equitable resources in making sure that every student that happens to go into school has the ability to get that quality education. It is very well known that depending on the education that you have at the elementary school level, at the high school level, is going to be a big determining factor on how you do at the university level. And I want to kind of like pull back a little bit from Cindy when you said that you don't necessarily think it's a scam. I don't know if it's necessarily a scam, but I definitely believe that he is taking advantage of how the system is set up here in order to say that, hey, I have the school, you have a desire to learn, you can come here and learn from me. But as you all have mentioned, that the curricula that is offered to students that are going to Peterson University are not objective. They have no standards. They have no accreditation. There is no proper standard. I know I keep on saying standard, but whatever. That's the best term I can come up with right now. That is going to be a proper determining factor of what type of education these people are getting to. So it's definitely a portion of taking advantage of students who may not necessarily had the ability or had like the resources available to them to get the quality education starting from the ground up. And then they end up in places like this. And I'm just thinking that there was a huge time period, I would say like in between the early to mid 2000s, when there was a lot of for-profit schools that were being sued because they were promising a quality education. They were promising accreditation. They were promised, different, like a proper standard for people to be able to get educated and actually get a real job in, that were pays well. And all the things that were being promised didn't come. So I don't know. I see Peterson probably going the same route, to be honest with you.
I remember a lot of tech schools doing that back in the day.
Tech schools, air tech quotes. Schools, yeah. Exactly.
Yep, I remember. And I remember that, as I recall, like 80%, they were flunking out like 80% of the students after the school had been paid, obviously, right? So yeah, that was quite a, and I agree with you. I don't think that Peterson set it up as a scam, but I definitely think people are getting scammed. That's the problem. And I guess that's it for this segment. And we'd like to hear what you thought about it. Put your comments or put your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more of the nonprofits, you can do so by clicking on this link right down below me.